Welcome everyone to Buddhist Center. It's Sunday, and normally we would talk about Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, and specifically the section that we're in dealing with the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity. But today, being that it's New Year's Eve, and also that Laurie, everyone, a lot of you know, some of you don't on the other applications. My partner is going in for brain surgery on Friday, and it's quite a complex surgery. So we're all, of course, quite nervous. And today's practice will be just dedicated to, everybody who's suffering and everybody who's experiencing illness. But specifically, today's practice will be dedicated to the successful completion of the surgery on Friday for Laurie Rankin. And not only successfully, meaning that she lives, but successful meaning that there aren't any kind of cognitive impairments or there are any kind of obstacles afterward. We know how well Laurie took care of Rinpoche, and what a good Dharma practitioner she is, and that we're all trying the best that we can to advance on this path that we've been shown by these kind holy gurus. So today's practice, talk, whatever we are going to call it, let's all practice together. And let's think about what we've learned over the last however many years, whether it's decades or whether it's only days, whatever it is that we've learned in the period of time since we were introduced to Buddhism. Let's reflect on that and see if we can, in some way, if I can share with you ways that I practice it and the way that I look at it, maybe it'll kind of set off a light bulb in you the way that it did in me when some of my other teachers explained things or practitioners talked about the way that they did things, and it helped me to evolve towards my eventual perfection. So that's what I'd like to share with you today, because I've come to believe, I've discovered that this is an actually seems to be true, in dependence upon my studies and analysis and so forth. I haven't been able to realize some of these great things that we read about, but some of the smaller things that have happened to my mind have made me conclude that this information is worthwhile enough to keep going with, and allowed me to conclude that this information will be what saves me altogether in the long run from suffering and from not having a perfect state of happiness. And this is what I've become convinced of over, almost 30 years of looking at the Dharma, and, trying the best I can to apply it to my life. And because of having such a good teacher, such an incredible root guru, Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, who knew exactly, as the Buddhas do, how to speak to an individual as he spoke to you as individuals, and help me to kind of discover that this path is an accurate path. So today we all, came to the Dharma, we came to a Buddhist center, generally speaking, because of some sort of question like, why do I have to experience all of this suffering? And why does the happiness that seems like it'll never go away always seem to go away? And why, when I have everything that I'm supposed to have, and I can see in other cultures, I can see other places in the world where people have nothing, yet I'm still totally dissatisfied in some way, shape, or form. Why is that? Some people, why do I feel like this isn't my first go round? Why do I feel like this isn't my first life? We meet a lot of Dharma practitioners who say that they immediately are drawn to the idea of reincarnation because they've always felt, like there was something more to the picture than was being discussed with them. Why would any compassionate, loving being, if there were a creator God, create such a place of discrimination and suffering and poverty and affluence in other places without any kind of rhyme or reason? Why? Why do I have to be separated from things that I find so pleasant and meet with unpleasant things? Why? So these were a lot of the questions that I've heard, or I came to the Dharma with, that I feel so fortunate personally that these questions were able to be answered in the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma by Lord Buddha. So when we first come to the teachings, we have to become convinced in some way or another that this information is valuable beyond like a feeling of karmic connection, because that draws so many of us to this. We feel like, oh, this feels like home. These Buddhist teachings feel like they make sense to me. But if we just rely on that draw alone, and we don't convince ourselves of it more so, that draw was kind of always there, and it's not strong enough to keep you going if you don't enhance it. You first are drawn to it, and then you learn about it, and you can become convinced that it wasn't just a fluke. It wasn't just like a song you liked on the radio and then didn't like anymore. You become convinced that it's something that's lasting, something that will really, really work in the long run. Whereas all of these other things that, you or myself have come to chase after to try to find that same result, came up leaving myself wanting and suffering. And, we come to the Dharma with a lot of questions. And so today I'd just like to practice with all of you. I'd like to, do what we would do. These practices that we go over and over and over again, we do that so that when we're in an extremely difficult situation, when we're extremely terrified, when we don't know what to do, and we think that, everything's falling apart and nothing is ever going to work again, when our mind's in that kind of state, we immediately can have it drawn towards the antidote of the Dharma, the antidote of the teachings, the understanding of impermanence, the understanding of dependent origination, the understanding of the lack of inherent existence, the understanding of love and compassion being the only way to our complete happiness. And in times of complete fear and fright and just emotional chaos, it's very hard to draw upon these teachings if we don't have an intense amount of repetition. So this is why we talk about, how to the steps of the path over and over and over again. It's not because we couldn't memorize them if we really put our mind to it. And, if we had to do it for a college exam, you could probably come up with a general outline of the Lam Rim in a week, if you're not spending all of your time on it. But that doesn't mean that it can change your mind. It can change your life. It can change the way you think, and it can make you, in a time of extreme terror, maybe right at the end of your life, right about before you're going to die, be able to pull this information up so readily as if you would the alphabet right now. Right when I said it, you were like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so readily available in your mind. And if the Dharma is that readily available in your mind, if you're able to say, oh my, I'm scared, if you're able to come up with those words are readily available in your mind if it's not tamed. But if the words of the Dharma are readily available in your mind, then they can act as kind of a healing, soothing nectar for whatever circumstance is going on at that moment. And this has been shown time and time again by great masters like Khenser Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, when he was extremely sick, in incredible amounts of suffering, with all of his organs breaking down, and he was able to still laugh. He was able to still look me in the eye. He was still able to give me teachings up until the last few days, where his talking became very difficult. And to see him be able to pass the way he did without any kind of nervousness, without any kind of gripping at anything, just being able to just pass the way that he did, and knowing he was going to pass, was different than the way normally people do when they know they're at that end state and they're crying for the doctors to do anything that they can. There wasn't this sense of terror and chaos in Rinpoche's mind. And I've, witnessed, 100 times where there would have just been chaos, confusion, and an inability for me to even function. if I was physically experiencing or had going on what, I watched Rinpoche have go on. But he was able to, because he had this nectar of the Dharma. He had this soothing, the only panacea for our suffering in his mind. He was able to show us, he was able to display to us that this is how a practitioner has no regrets. This is what the great Kadampa masters mean when they say, I have no regrets. Having no regrets means that your mind's saturated by the Dharma, and you know that there's nothing that can help but the Dharma. So let's practice together. Imagine that you've, cleaned the room, and assembled images of enlightenment, So you would, if you were going to invite guests and you were going to invite dignitaries to your home, you'd make sure it was perfect and clean. And now you're inviting the most important beings in the universe into your room. So you clean it, and you're imagining a lot of things as well when you're cleaning it. Look at the Lamrim teachings on Chuddapantaka and the meditations that he did, that he was taught to do because he wasn't able to really practice and memorize, and his mind wasn't able to really move forward with the Dharma very well. And what was going wrong was there wasn't purification. There wasn't this accumulation that his mind needed, his individual mind needed. We all have our own individual needs, and Chuddapantaka needed to clean and slowly imagine that the dirt he was cleaning with the afflictions in his mind and so forth. So when we're doing this cleaning, we can add a lot of flavor to it so that it enhances our practice. So these are just things that I encourage you to go look at in the beginning, called the 6 preparations, and in the various Lamrim commentaries, and in Pabunka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, you find these stories of the sweeping and the full story of Chuddapantaka. So I encourage you to look at that. So you clean the room and you assemble images of enlightenment, of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We're not going to have a class on how to make an altar today. So you assemble images of enlightenment, hopefully, at a height, not on the floor, have them. There's different points that are made, 3 feet or so high up off the floor. Could be a little lower, but, just as a general idea, just trying to keep things at a higher level that are holy, something that you consider special and precious. Think of the most special, precious, rare, fragile thing you could imagine. You wouldn't put it on the floor, a mingva. I don't know what that would be. To me, it's the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha now. But before, maybe it was like a BMX bike, that I kept in a special place, or my guitar that now isn't in a special place, that was in a very special place. So we change our perspective on what we feel is special and feel the value. Not that a guitar is not valuable. I'm not making that point today. Don't take that with you. But this is just what has happened in my life, and what I'm sharing with you. So we arrange the images of enlightenment. And then we make offerings. So we make offerings just before the class started, lit an incense. We have various offerings on the altar. I said the mantra for, multiplying virtue, and the mantra, which is Om Sambhara Sambhara Manasara Mahazo Om Mara Mara Managara Mahazo Hum. And I recited the mantra. And so we did that 7 times actually before class. And then we recited the mantra for making offerings, which says to make a rain of offerings down onto the merit field of Om Namo Bhagavate Benza Sarabhamana Tathagata Yarti Samsamda Benza Benza Mateja Benza Mavida Benza Mabuji Chitta Benza Mabodhi Mandaba Sakamanda Benza Savakama Avarana Vishudana Benza Soha. So we said that 7 times before class. So we're making these offerings, and imagine these beautiful, not only the ones we're making, we're imagining we're offering the sky and the mountains, things unowned, things that we own, just offering our bodies, offering everything that we can, because we come to know that there's nothing more important than these teachings, than these practices, because this is the only way that we can remove the afflictive obstructions and become free from suffering and the obstructions to omniscience, which means we're not only free from suffering, but we have the most perfect bliss possible. We have perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect wisdom, perfect power, skillful means. It's the only way that we can have this occur. So we're so fortunate that we have this. So we're imagining that all these offerings are being just showered on these holy beings that will help us evolve. And by, making our minds feel that these beings are so important because their information is so important. They can't transfer their realizations, take away our suffering, or or throw some water on us and make us free. They can teach us exactly what we need to be taught. And it's because we know that we need so badly to be taught exactly what our own specific continuums need to be free, that we will just offer anything to beings that would be able to do that. And this isn't because they want our stuff or need our stuff. It's a show of our mental state and our relationship to the beings in the Dharma that they teach. It's us saying that I will give anything. I will give anything. It's equally as important to me, my life, and this teaching. These things are equally important. So we come to then say that it's even more important, because this isn't the only life I'll have. It's the continuum of lives. Since beginningless time, I've been taking births. And sooner or later, I will realize a nirvana and no longer have to be forced into the various types of suffering. So the information that these beings have to offer is so precious that we come to, as we're doing these preparations, we're making our mind enriched with the reasons that we're doing it. We're making it personal so that we're not just throwing some stuff up and all on an altar and decorating. We're not decorating. We're making it so that it's a mental kind of practice that's going on of reverence and connection to love, connection to compassion, connection to omniscient state that we will eventually achieve, and the connection to the omniscient state that already exists of the Buddhas. And that omniscient being, because we're connecting to them, we create the causes for them to reflect on our pool, like the moon does on a lake that's there. If it's dried up, it doesn't reflect, but if it's there to reflect, it reflects. And when we create this, we have these supplications and we make offerings. We are imbuing our minds with this connectivity to the most important beings, the omniscient beings that dwell in the universe. And most importantly, our root Lama, who's inseparable from Aryatara, Kensar Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, or His Holiness the Dalai Lama, inseparable from Lord Chenrezig, who's in our world today. We're so fortunate that we've been connected to and had the physical embodiments of these beings right in our presence. And these beings don't have to physically be in our presence because the omniscient mind pervades everything. The Dharmakaya pervades everything. So we're so fortunate to have been connected with an accurate Dharma, a Dharma that shows us all of the stages of the path to enlightenment that are necessary. Now we sit down on a meditation cushion, it says, and we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture. We've gone over this posture many times. If you have some sort of problem with your back, disc problems, or any kind of physical limitations, don't push yourself with the 7-point Vairocana posture. This is the posture that's been presented in the meditation manuals as the most conducive to practice if you are in a physical condition to practice in this posture. So it makes it very clear, and in texts and other lamas make it very clear that this 7-point Vairocana posture, we shouldn't say we can't do it because we don't like stretching, but if we have a real physical limitation, then we should be quite careful with it. And I myself have disc problems. Half lotus is actually very comfortable for me to sit. Full lotus sometimes is fine, but other times it actually really aggravates my lower back problems. So I'm just sharing practice experience with you. This isn't something that I just come on Sunday and Thursday and talk about. This is something that in my life I try to apply, because I don't want to be the person that's like, you should really, really try sandalwood. It's the most delicious smelling scent in the world, who's never smelled it and doesn't have any. So I try to apply these teachings in my life. So we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture. It says in the text in this 3rd step. So let's all get into the 7-point Vairocana posture. And this is to try to clear our minds and get our body aligned in the best way possible to do practice. And then we generate refuge in bodhicitta. So why do we go for refuge? Why is the Buddha the one being, the being with the capital T, the only teacher with a capital T, the only being who's gotten rid of all the negative qualities and only has excellent qualities. Not just Buddha Shakyamuni, any being who has done the pathway of love, compassion, and wisdom of emptiness and achieved a cessation of the Mahayana cessation, the Mahayana foe destroyership, has achieved this. So we look at why is it that we would go for refuge? Why would we seek protection? Why would we run towards, as Rinpoche says, going for refuge? He would give the example of if a small child is around the parents and a dog comes running up, no matter what. A lot of children are terrified of dogs, and they'll run right to their parent for protection. And then the parent will shoo the dog away and say, "Don't worry, it's okay, it's okay. It won't hurt you, it won't hurt you." And this is what we're trying to do. The reason that the child is going to a being that's an appropriate refuge is because the being, the mother or the father has immense love for the child. So when the child runs to the mother or father, there's a sense of duty to protect. So this child's running towards someone who will protect, who has a duty in their mind to protect. And not only a duty in their mind to protect, but also the power to protect, the power to get rid of the dog, the power to get rid of this thing that's this fear that the child has in his or her mind, this fear he or she has of this, it seems like a monster's coming and maybe a chihuahua, but the child has so much fear, but knows that it's an appropriate, the parents are an appropriate refuge to go to because they have love and compassion for the child. They want the child to have happiness and be free from suffering. And they have the power to get rid of the dog. So likewise, why we go back to, we showed up here and had a bunch of questions. Why do I suffer? Why do I, keep having these experiences? Then we have to say, okay, what do I seek? I seek to have no suffering. What do I seek? I seek to have complete happiness. What do I seek? I seek to see the people around me not have to suffer and so forth. I really seek this kind of experience that isn't so like a thorn all of the time, like sandpaper all of the time. I seek a freedom from suffering. So how could I ever be free from suffering? How could this ever occur where I wouldn't have to have this state of birth, aging, sickness, and death, separating from pleasant things, meeting with unpleasant things, not getting what I want, and the suffering of this body and mind? What would I have to do? If I've never been able to figure out how to stop those sufferings. I've been told a lot of things would make me happy and make me happy for good, but I've never found anything that could stop those sufferings. And I've never found anybody, I hadn't found anybody who could present me with a point of view that would make sense, that could make me eventually achieve full kinds of happiness and complete freedoms from suffering. I'd never heard anything. But when I got to the Buddha Dharma, I heard about the Four Noble Truths almost immediately. So luckily, I had studied all of the other religions, and not saying other religions aren't good. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about my own personal path. And I had felt like they'd be hopeless, that I was just going to make up my own religion. I was at a point in my life where I was really seeking more spiritually. And when I read about the Four Noble Truths, it didn't take very long for me to say, this makes sense. It makes sense that suffering is something that's not occurring all of the time, and that things that don't occur all the time are called impermanent things, and that impermanent things are caused by something. And if it's not occurring all of the time, it's not this kind of perpetual thing. It's causing itself. It must have something, some sort of dynamic is happening. Something's happening that makes it so I have a mind that can be suffering so immensely. And then a week later, a day later, 10 minutes later, have a mind that experiences such forms of happiness. And that neither of these states of mind seem to be static. They seem very, very fluid. And the Buddha started, at the first noble truth that I read about, pointed out exactly what it was that was going on with me in terms of the empirical realities of my suffering. And I had an inclination that there were previous lives. I luckily came with this kind of idea, not memory of any of it, just kind of an idea that this makes more sense than anything I've heard. And it built upon this idea that, okay, this being knows what he's talking about because he's speaking my language. He's speaking about my reality that's so clear. And I started to believe more of the things that the Buddha spoke about that weren't so easy to see just around me because of the faith that I had in the kind of empirical things, the things that, like Aryadeva says, you don't worry about the very hidden phenomena Buddha talks about right away. Look at the things that you can use through reasoning and analysis and correct signs. And once you establish that this stuff Buddha was talking about that nobody else talks about or nobody else would believe is true because you've established it through a good, correct sign, then you can say some of this other stuff must be true. The Buddha wouldn't just make up all this other stuff that everyone doesn't know about. So it helps us to, kind of become more willing and open to believe in more of this larger universe that the Buddha talks about in terms of 6 realms of hell, hungry ghost, animal, human demigods, and gods. So you start to, through studying and saying, yes, the Buddha's speaking my language. Okay, so the Buddha's speaking my language, and the Buddha's saying that these things that are occurring aren't permanent, they're impermanent. And everything that's impermanent has a cause, and it's not perpetually happening suffering. So it's not like it's just causing itself to go from one to the next. In terms of the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, the difference between those two variations. One's happiness, but it's contaminated happiness in samsara, therefore it's suffering. And the other is the kind of suffering, which is suffering, and it's in samsara. So, and this pervasive compounded suffering is the fact that we have these aggregates, and that we crave these aggregates and will want more. So we have this kind of perpetual cycle. So we start to see if what the Buddha is saying is making sense. And if the Buddha is saying that there's a cause behind all of this, then we have to see what that cause may be. And then we find the Buddha teaches what the truth of origin is at the second noble truth, and shows us that all of our sufferings arise from a misapprehension of things, just a wrong way of looking at everything. And here's the kind of hidden phenomena that Aryadeva is talking about that we then have to investigate. We then have to discover whether it makes sense or not. We can say, yes, these things that suffer, sickness is suffering. That's easy. But okay, so, suffering has a cause. All right. Yeah. You can say an illness has like a cause at an empirical level instead of in terms of cells and, viruses and so forth. But why you? Why that day? Why you, etc. So this is the kind of the question, about, what's the origin? What's making this whole show that kind of sucks a lot go on? What's causing it? What's causing my happiness not even to be happy? What is it? So then here's the part where we have to start to hear what the Buddha said, not just buy into it. Buddha says it's self-grasping ignorance. Okay, done. Not just buy into it, but figure out what is this origin and how could it relate to these experiences of suffering and these experiences of contaminated happiness that are suffering. So we have to investigate this first this and second noble truth, and see the relationship of how we are bound to cyclic existence. How Nagarjuna says that ceasing of karma and afflictions is nirvana. Karma and afflictions arise from conceptuality that arises from elaborations, the self-grasping ignorance. Ceasing of emptiness causes all of this to end. So when we look at what does that mean, that we have since beginningless time this self-grasping ignorance. We grasp at our self of person and self of phenomena as being inherently existent, intrinsically existent, existing right inside of the object. These are all just words. Again, we have to meditate thoroughly on, am I Jeff, who is found within my aggregates, separate from my aggregates, one of my aggregates, all of my aggregates? Or, could it be what Nagarjuna says? It's just Jeff is just merely imputed in dependence upon a basis, in dependence upon these aggregates, just merely designated in dependence upon these aggregates. Is it that way, or is there something else findable? And the Buddha says there's not something that's findable other than a conventionally, nominally designated self of person that's merely designated on a collection of aggregates, the aggregates of our, physical aggregates and our mental aggregates, basically. Is there something findable outside of that? And the Buddha says that the fact that we think there's something findable outside of this mere designation and dependence upon a collection is what runs our life and makes everything wrong with our life and has made everything wrong with all of our lives. And if we somehow fix it, nothing will be wrong ever again. That's really the teaching of the Buddha. Like, if we fix this thing that's always been wrong, that's made us look at everything wrong, then nothing will be wrong ever again, because that thing won't be broken anymore. And it's such a beautiful, inspiring thing to know that there can be an end and there's a logic behind it. It's not just because somebody said so. We can see then, what's the logic behind this? Okay, what's this misapprehension? Why does it matter that I feel, even at a sensory level, when I look at things around me, that they objectively exist, intrinsically exist by way of their own character? Why does it matter? Why does it matter that I think that I exist by way of my own character, inherently, intrinsically, from my own side? Why does that matter? Well, it matters because that opposes reality. And it's from this misapprehension, this kind of deluded mind that's starting off wrong, that's seeing something that doesn't exist to exist. Inherent existence doesn't exist. We're starting from a place that thinks inherent existence exists, that this Jeff is a concrete Jeff from his own side, but I just can't find him. And I'm not willing to accept that it's just a collection and a name, and it's this thing I've been putting together to try to relate to a world around me that's just been making it all up through the power of my own mind. I've been projecting onto a screen through the power of my own mind. Sometimes sad movies and sometimes happy movies, but all just movies made through the power of my mind. This will really make me happy. This is da 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 da. I hate da 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 da. Fill in your own blanks. So we have this self-grasping ignorance that thinks there's concrete this, concrete you, concrete me. There's self, then there's other that's separate. So let's start there. I'm the most important person in the universe. And then there's other that's separate, and we'll see how important you are to me in dependence upon how you make me feel. And let's see how all the things around me are important to me in dependence upon how they make me feel and how they reify that I exist inherently. My house. This is my house that I'm in. Well, it was somebody called Ed or something's house before, and he's dead. But he thought it was his house. This is his concrete house. And I look around, this is all my stuff, but if I die, this is somebody else is going to come in and be like, this is my concrete house. So we have all of this stuff around us, reifying our self of person and the self of phenomena is, and our belief that both have an inherent existence are working with one another to just build up our suffering. And how? So we grasp at things as having this way or that way, and ourselves as having this way or that way. And then we think, oh, because it has this way or that way, I should cherish myself more than anyone else. And that thing over there is really going to make me happy because it's this and that and this. And then in dependence upon all of these kind of ways of thinking that come from something that doesn't exist, come from, the Harry the rabbit that doesn't exist, a rabbit with horns, I'm making decisions based on something that's not real. So how good's that going to go? So I'm making decisions, something that's not real. I'm making something that's not real even more unreal with inappropriate attention and conceptuality. And now I'm ready. I'm ready to be attached. I'm ready to be angry. I'm ready to be jealous. I'm ready to be prideful. I'm ready to just be off to the races with you fill in the blanks with all of those disturbing things, those things that disturb your mind. Love, feeling of this kind of blissful love is not one of those disturbing things. You know the difference, whatever that disturbing thing is. And then that disturbing emotion, that attachment makes me willing to, through my body, speech, and mind, create non-virtue. Think about it. You're attached to something. This is mine. Get away from me. And then that attachment that started out with, oh, this is going to make me happy, is now turned into anger out of the attachment. Very interesting how these disturbing emotions arise. And they just perpetuate themselves. And then I'm angry at something, I'm willing to physically fight, verbally yell, mentally just, think terrible things. MF you, as you say, in my mind, just do it. Because of this aversion, because of the inappropriate attention I gave the object, because I think it inherently exists and I inherently exist. So now I'm acting out, I'm creating karma, contaminated karmas through my body, speech, and mind. And then those contaminated karmas lead to cyclic existence. So ceasing of contaminated karmas and afflictions is nirvana. Those karma and afflictions come from this conceptuality, the inappropriate attention. The inappropriate attention, the reason I can overvalue and overconceptualize everything around me is because I believe it inherently exists. I don't see it as like a mirage, like an illusion. As Nagarjuna says, if it wasn't like a mirage or illusion, then I would be able to get closer to it and find it. Like if the water existed as it appears in the mirage, I should get closer to it and find water. If the inherently existent self existed right in the object as it appears, self of person, I should be able to find it as I get closer to me. But when I can't find the me that inherently exists, I find it's like a mirage. Because although there is nothing there in the terms of the mirage, there is something here. There is an existent Jeff. There is a self of person here. It's just not existing the way that I think that it does. And the idea that some of the Buddhist teachers are throwing around these days that no self means that self doesn't exist is wrong. It's not a correct understanding of Buddhism at all. It's actually somebody who really didn't study very well and has looked at a text once or twice, had a book this big maybe, gave it a glance, and then came to a conclusion that's just wrong and then decided to spread it. The Buddha is very clear at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma what the definitive meaning of the reality is. And we're so fortunate that we learn it's what Nagarjuna says, that it's from the self-grasping ignorance that comes this overconceptuality, inappropriate attention that causes afflictions to arise and disturbance of our mind. And then we're off to the races with our body, speech, and mind. And we're going to engage in karmas that will cause more samsara. So we have to get rid of that self-grasping ignorance if we want to, realize something other than samsara, the opposite of samsara. You realize the nirvana. And because we're on the Mahayana track, realize the Buddha's nirvana. So we meditate on this and we come to understand that this is what causes our suffering. And then the Buddha said that suffering can end. And we know that if we can somehow, like if a cause couldn't be like removed, then it couldn't end. But now we're learning that we're believing something that's not true is true. Now we just need to believe what's true. We can change our minds. We've done it a million times about a million things. So we have to stop believing what's not true is true and start believing what's true is true. And then start our whole universe will change. Our whole way of being and acting and what we think is important. Everything will just completely change. And we'll eventually, as a result, through, calm mind and renunciation and bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, go through a process that will allow us to never suffer again and have perfect happiness, perfect love, compassion, powerful, skillful means, etc. So, wow, we could do that. That would be amazing. So there's a pathway to it. So which is the fourth noble truth, the superior truth of path that we have to engage in. We have to engage in that Arya path that extinguishes the root of cyclic existence, which is the self-grasping ignorance. We have to go through those pathways. We have to go through Teata Om Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasangate, Bodhisoha. We have to go through the learner's paths of accumulation and preparation, and then the paths of the nobles, of the path of seeing meditation, and then the resultant path of Buddhahood, of no more learning. We ourselves have to go through this with our minds, and we have to have the Arya realizations, the realizations of emptiness at the various stages along that path once we get to the noble path of the path of seeing. Up until then, it's only inferential understandings of emptiness, and we have to couple it with calm abiding and have a union of this calm mind with the understanding of emptiness that's so close to direct perception, but yet still isn't, in order to eventually get to the path of the noble being, the Arya being, the being who's seen emptiness directly, who's on the path of seeing, and hopefully is a bodhisattva and is then on the first bodhisattva ground. So we're so fortunate. So now we know that we're talking about something that's really valuable. I think that you can concur that the words that I've said are not weak. They aren't, words of someone who has looked at a manual this big. These are the words that have come through my ears from Khenser Geshe Wandak for 25 years, and Dalai Lama, and Geshe Lobsang Gompo, and Khenser Lobsang Gyatso, and Demolocha Rinpoche, and Geshe Dorje Damdu, and Umslo Geshe Aga, Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin. These aren't just, I think you can tell, these aren't words that are just like hollow and without any kind of weight. These are coming right from Tsongkhapa, because these are and coming right from the Nalanda Pandas and right from Lord Buddha, the four holy lineages of the Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, and Galupa. These are the words that we're saying. So this is valuable information. So now we're going to bring sentient beings here. So now this first part, we're establishing now who has taught what I just spoke of, what suffering is, why suffering is, how suffering can end, and how exactly it can end. Who has taught this? Who has shown this complete path in an unerring way? Buddha Shakyamuni has. Dharma Kirti says, you alone are the teacher of the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha is the tenet holder that says all composite things are impermanent, all contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. All phenomena are the nature of emptiness and selflessness, and nirvana is peace. Transcending sorrow is peace. This is what makes one a Buddhist tenet holder. What makes one a Buddhist is going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. But one would really, truly only be able to see the Buddha as the capital T teacher, the protector, the one gone to bliss, if he or she had really figured out why that was an appropriate title, why Buddha is the supreme protector, the only teacher, the only being that taught the Four Noble Truths, and why that matters, why being the one who showed the origin of suffering, this, how one is bound to cyclic existence and how one is unbound from cyclic existence in four very, very clear ways with two sets of cause and effect relationships. Amazing. Buddha's the only one. So here in this third part of the preparations where we're going for refuge, we establish in our mind that the Buddha is an appropriate source of refuge. And in the beginning of the great treatise on the stages of the tantric path to enlightenment, we find this is done first. Establishing the Buddha is the one who taught exactly how to get rid of the root of cyclic existence, and no other beings taught how to get rid of the root of cyclic existence. And without getting rid of the root of cyclic existence, suffering will always be there, even if it's been suppressed by other traditions and other ways of meditation. So we establish in our minds, I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So here we see this is a special Mahayana type of refuge, because I say, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I'm going for refuge to you. I'm seeking your protection, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddha, I'm calling out to you for help. I'm calling out to you for protection, because I know that you are the one who's eliminated all faults and only has excellent qualities, has perfect wisdom, love, power, skillful means, compassion, has all of this perfection. And I'm calling out to you to seek your protection. And I'm saying, I want to be protected not only from the afflictive obstructions, which keep me from being free from suffering. The afflictive obstructions keep me bound to cyclic existence and suffering. But I'm going for refuge to you because I don't want, to have insufficient spiritual realizations. I want to have the complete path. I'm going for refuge to you because I want to become a Buddha that not only is in a nirvana, like a here and solitary realizer in an abiding nirvana, but I'm going for refuge to you to become a Buddha who's in a non-abiding nirvana, who's not only gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions, but has gotten rid of the obstructions to omniscience as well, and is the most perfect, fulfilled being in the universe, whereas a here and solitary realizer has not even fulfilled his or her own needs completely. So I'm going for refuge to you to protect me not only from suffering, but protect me from being inclined towards lower pathways, which would lead me to an abiding nirvana, which would lead me to not completing even my own goals, let alone all sentient beings' needs, goals. And the only way that I can be completely fulfilled is if I'm willing to, and make it day and night my only thought, to bring all sentient beings to the state of bliss that I seek. So now we would normally in our practice then generate bodhicitta. What does that mean? And we normally in our practice, in our classes, we bring all sentient beings here to be our guests. So now let's meditate on bodhicitta for a moment. So now we've sought this protector. We know that we have this incredible gift. We know that we have a way out of suffering. We know that there's some way to achieve a complete Buddhahood, because Buddha said that our minds are exactly like his was and his is. His was in terms of having adventitious defilements, and Buddha was able to, through a series of lifetimes, purify his mind and become Buddha Shakyamuni that we know, where he no longer had afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. But also is the same nature of our mind right now, because our mind is empty of inherent existence, just like the Buddha's mind is empty of inherent existence. So our natural Buddha nature is the same nature as the Buddha's nature of the Buddha's Dharmakaya. And our proliferating Buddha nature, our mental consciousness that can change, is the same kind of mental consciousness, the same ingredients that the Buddha had to work with in order to go through the various pathways that he went through to be transformed into a perfect being. So, wow. We have this Buddha nature, we have this potential, the Buddha potential, we have this gold within us that we merely need to clear away the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. We have this mind that doesn't have to be hindered, that's in the nature of clear light and unsullied, that can be as expansive as it needs to be. It's merely hindered right now. It's frozen in ice. It's trapped in a concrete blanket. It has a gymnast that's stuck in a spacesuit and can't do what a gymnast should do. Our mind should just expand to all sentient beings, yet it's hindered. And it's hindered by so many things, but most of all hindered by the self-grasping ignorance that gives rise to self-cherishing attitude. So we begin to meditate on bodhicitta. We begin to meditate on the various steps within the bodhicitta meditations. We have the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta, and we have equalizing, exchanging self with others for realizing bodhicitta. And we can combine these two. So when we look at the pre-step to 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta, we try to equalize friends, enemies, and neutrals by seeing that we've had all of these varying relationships with beings since beginningless time, and that this life isn't the only life, and that we've had relationships that were disgusting with the ones that we've loved, and we had, wonderful relationships with the people we have relationships that we find disgusting in this life, and strangers that we walk by, we've had love for and we've had hate for. So we meditate on this very, very well in beginningless lives and start to get more familiar with a bigger picture. And then we say that I would be equally willing to benefit all of these types of beings because of this kind of larger picture that I'm looking at. It would make sense that I'd be equally, I have an open mind, if you will. When I say equally willing to benefit, I have an open mind in relation to everyone, because I'm willing to say that I'm not seeing things so clearly. I'm starting to chip away at this idea that I have a permanent unitary independent self of person that isn't moving moment by moment so quickly and hasn't been moving moment by moment so quickly since beginningless time. I start to chip away at that idea as I do these meditations. Even though they're supposed to be for generating bodhicitta, they're also chipping away at my self-grasping ignorance, chipping away at this idea that this is all that there is, this nihilistic notion that if I can't see it, it's not there. So then we meditate on all beings that have had these relationships with us. We then start to hone in on the relationships that every single one of them has had with us, where they took care of us when we were vulnerable, when they were labeled as mother or brother or sister, or as, whatever being you can relate to in this life, who takes care of you when you're vulnerable, who would do anything for you, who would, if you were suffering, change positions with you in a moment. This kind of personality in relation to you, every single sentient being has had. Every single sentient being has been willing to take care of you in this same way. And we start to think about the ways that they've taken care of us. The person in this life has taken care of us. People in this life have taken care of us. And we start to see that other beings, no matter who they are, who, even though we're so making such kind of silly labels of friend more than other, enemy more than other, stranger, I don't know you. It's so silly that we're making these labels, because all of these beings have been so kind to us, and we're thinking of the ways they've been kind to us. And the way that we can think about kindness is by thinking of kindness shown in this life. This is how we relate to it. We're not thinking of something we've read in a book. We're using our own life experience to think of kindness, and then saying, oh, every single sentient being, friends, enemies, and neutrals, that I'm now saying I'm equally willing to benefit, and I've established have taken care of me when I was vulnerable, took care of me in all of these ways. And you start to really saturate your mind with this idea so much that you say, I must repay their kindness. I'm going to take it upon myself, the task of repaying their kindness in some way or another. And then you start to meditate on this kind of exchange of the idea that you would normally have, where you see yourself as more important than others. You start to see that kind of makes no sense by seeing that just like you wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, all sentient beings want happiness and don't want suffering. Just like you have Buddha nature and have this beautiful seed of perfection within you, this beautiful loving potential within you, all sentient beings have this Buddha nature, have this beautiful seed of perfection, this perfect loving potential within them. Every being is equally important. I am not inherently existent. Other is not inherently existent. I can only establish I, self, by establishing other. Other is only established by establishing self. When we look at far, far is only established by near. Near is only established by far. So we look at this kind of start to shatter our notions, our grasping at this us and them mentality, this creating a barrier between myself being able to care about you. We start to shatter it with logic by saying it just doesn't make sense. You want happiness just like I want happiness. You are thrust into these set of aggregates just like I was thrust into these set of aggregates. You have self-grasping ignorance, so you're here. You're not reacting the way that I want you to react if I consider you an enemy because of the self-grasping ignorance. I'm not remembering you because of my self-grasping ignorance of having taken care of me when I'm vulnerable. So we're starting to see this equality and this kind of silliness of thinking that we're more important than everyone else in the universe. If everyone else in the universe was standing there and an alien came, everyone in the world was standing there and an alien came, and I was standing there and everyone in the universe was standing there, that alien would never say I was more important than everyone in the universe. They would probably say, oh, everyone, it's dependent upon each other. They're equally important. So we start to think about ourselves in relation to others in a more realistic way that sets up the next step for us to be able to see the downfalls of our self-cherishing attitude, that cherishing ourselves is disturbing to our mind, is this naked kind of wanderer that exists within us, this self-cherishing attitude that comes to us empty-handed every time and says, I have a handful of goodness for you, but always just has fooled us with an empty hand and made us think that it was a good idea and just made us sadder and more depressed and more full of anxiety. And then we look at beings who cherish others. We look at times in our life when we've cherished others, and we see the difference in the emotional state between those two things. So now we've established that we really want to repay this kindness, and we're reinforcing this idea that we are not the most important beings in the universe, and that this idea that we cherish ourselves more than others has been our downfall and has caused us to suffer in life after life after life. We just can't see it. And this self-grasping ignorance and self-cherishing attitudes are the ones to blame for everything. Yet we give them so much credit and we say that we can't survive without you. Darwin's theory, we need to have all of these afflictions and so forth in order to survive. We're so clouded by this idea, and we see His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we see beings like Jesus Christ, they put others' needs before their own, and they're so full of joy. We see when a parent first has a child, there isn't this idea of what can I get from you? There's this idea of what can I give to you? And it's so blissful and so full of joy. We see in just common empirical reality where when we want to cherish someone else, when you love someone and give them flowers and it lights up their life, what that feeling is in your mind versus when you're being selfish, miserly, and only thinking about yourself. You can see the difference when you use logic and reasoning about these things. So we use logic to try to convince ourselves. We convince ourselves that these beings have been so kind to us and have benefited us in so many long and short-term ways, and so forth. We think about this and we convince ourselves that there's no other way to think than this way. And this is how you become a bodhisattva. You become to know that there's no other way to think than the way that you want to become a Buddha as quickly as possible for the sake of all sentient beings. It builds up to that step. It builds up to that reality through doing these meditations, through then doing the Tonglen practice, a giving and taking practice. There's a number of ways to do that. I would not suggest that you do that unless you've really worked hard at the beginning steps. When we look at just the, separating out, I'm combining the 7-point cause and effect and equalizing, exchanging self with others practice right now. If we separate out the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice, where we find Tonglen, where we find giving and taking on being suffering in the form of lights or waters, and giving them happiness in the form of lights or waters, and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and so forth. There's various different Tonglen meditations. But when we look at it in terms of separating this meditation out and the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice, you must meditate on the exchange of self with other, in terms of the equalizing of self and other first, recognizing the equality of importance and so forth. and then meditate on the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitude and the benefits of cherishing others. You must have this ingrained in your mind, and then do a giving and taking practice. And that, what I just said and what we've worked up to, has to have the foundation of the understanding of the 8, 6, and 3 types of suffering. If it doesn't, going through these steps and getting anywhere near love and compassion, you don't even know what happiness is. You don't even know what kind of suffering you're freeing beings from. You don't even know about it for yourself. How could you even dream about it for others, as Shanti Deva says? So we do this giving and taking practice in the various ways that we've been taught. And then we think about, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to exchange myself with others. You get to the step where you say, I recognize that the only way to freedom, the only way to happiness, the happiness beings in the universe have put others' needs before their own. The Bodhisattvas put others' needs before their own. The Dalai Lama has learned to look into everyone's eyes as if they're his dear mother. It just, you can see it. He's looking in everybody's eyes with this intense love and compassion. I must switch this way of thinking. I must put others' needs before my own. And then you begin to meditate on the great kindness, this kind of extra special kindness that others have shown. When we look at different types of beings, when we look at friends, we look at loved ones, they can give us, benefit in the, kind of small amounts of benefit in the short term. We look at, what they can give us, some food, they can give us some drink, they can give us some money, they can show us some support. When we look at strangers, we look at neutrals. This is a teaching that Geshe Dorje Damdu recently gave. When we look at neutrals or strangers, they can give us a vast amount of benefit in the short term. Because they, it's in dependence upon strangers that we have everything that we have in our lives, all of our food, all of our clothing, all of our, heating in our house, everything that we can think of is in dependence upon other sentient beings. One friend couldn't possibly have gone out and got oared or whatever you do to get the earth together, to make all this, to get the paint and all that. It took an enormous amount of strangers for me to have this cup in my hand. And we look at all of the numerous amounts of things that we have that are dependent upon strangers. So we see how kind strangers are to us. Friends are kind to us. It's so obvious. Strangers, it's a little less obvious, but when we think about it, strangers are extremely kind to us. They get up early in the morning, do jobs, many that we would never want to do in order for us to have the things that make us comfortable. We think about, just to get us the simple things, this piece of paper and the ink and everything written on it so I can study the Dharma. We think about how much that would take to get to me, and it's because of the great kindness of sentient beings that I'm able, these strangers are able to get the Dharma to me, the panacea for all of my problems. And then when we look at enemies, we look at difficult people, it's in dependence upon them that my long-term goals can be satisfied, because it's in dependence upon someone who's difficult that I might consider an enemy, that I can see that my mind does not react without bias. I can see that my mind gets agitated. I can see that the self-cherishing attitude within my mind has not been extinguished. And I can be fooled and think, oh, strangers, I love them all and have compassion for them all. And my friends, I love them all and have compassion for them all. And I can be deluded and think that I'm actually a spiritual practitioner who doesn't have the self-cherishing attitude. But when I encounter someone difficult, they show the sign in my mind, like the mirror of the Dharma, that there's a smudge on my face that needs to be washed off. There's some more practice that I need to do with love and compassion and so forth. And the workings up to this step where I could see this great kindness of somebody who I find difficult. And then once we can get to the point where in our minds we have this conviction that all 3 types of beings, friends, enemies, and neutrals, all types of beings, every being in the universe is a being that I couldn't imagine not having happiness in its highest point, and I couldn't imagine not being free from suffering in its entirety. I would get to a point in my practice where I would say, I take on myself the task of freeing every single one of these sentient beings from suffering. And I will take on my task of doing this, myself the task of doing this. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find them all and I'm going to do it. And then we come to this realization, once we've gotten this conviction that's so firm and so grounded in logic and so grounded in this saturation of our mind that we couldn't imagine doing anything but freeing sentient beings from suffering and bring them to happiness, we come to the conclusion that we're handicapped, and in the terms of not having clairvoyance, not even knowing where all the sentient beings are, not knowing how to speak in their individual languages, not knowing what to do, not having a clue. And we come to the conclusion that we must, because the Buddha is the only being, the only awakened one in the universe who could actually pull that job off of bringing all sentient beings to a state of happiness that's free from suffering. How? By teaching them the truth of suchness in their individual languages, at their individual language levels, in all kinds of verbal and non-verbal ways, in order to create this evolution. So I must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And this is what you do when you get to that third step, and it says generate refuge. You generate real refuge, generate bodhicitta. You generate the most real contrived version of bodhicitta you possibly can, so that then when you're sitting there and you then next step, you invoke the merit field, the fourth step, it's doing it from a place that's so solid, and you're doing it with a real purpose and reason, and you're bringing the merit field in front of you, and you're making the 7-limb offering, and you're making a 7-limb offering of prostrations and offering and confession and rejoicing and requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma and begging the Buddhas to stay in this world and dedicating the virtue. You're doing it with the conviction that, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the merit I accumulate by practicing giving and the other 5 perfections. May I become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, for the sake of all sentient beings. I'm doing all of this practice to become a Buddha as quickly as possible. I'm making these prostrations to the merit field and imagining all the holy beings in the space in front of me, all of the Buddhas and all the beings that have removed all the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. I'm imagining them in the space in front of me. And I'm imagining that I have brought all sentient beings here to be my guests, to be able to experience this, to be able to partake in these preparations with me. You can do it right from the beginning step of cleaning the room and setting up the altar, imagining that all beings are doing it along with you. All beings are putting offerings out along with you. All beings are in the 7-point Vairocana posture. All beings are clearing their minds and getting to a calm place and doing maybe some breathing to calm down. All beings are engaging in this idea of analysis of going for refuge. All beings are generating bodhicitta. All beings are engaging in the 7-limb prayer practice. Then all beings are making a mandala offering in the 6th preparation, to all of the merit field. And then all beings are making further supplications to the merit field. Oh, may I understand renunciation. May I please understand bodhicitta. May I please understand the correct view of emptiness. May I please quickly understand the stages of the action, performance, yogic, and highest yoga tantra. May I complete the 2 stages of generation and completion. Please bless me to be able to understand this. Bless me to be able to, in all my lives, be connected to my Lama as closely as possible and never separate, never have any separation between my Dharma friends, my Vajra brothers and sisters, so that we can quickly, swiftly get to a place where we can become Buddhas and help each other, whether it's from the standpoint of now or the standpoint of when you're a Buddha and you will help me because of the connection we have. When I'm a Buddha, I'll help you because of the connection that we have. And we'll all eventually achieve that state of enlightenment where there's no more suffering and there's only perfect bliss. This is the way we think about these practices. And I know we're just about out of time. I had a lot of other things in mind, but I'm really happy that we got to talk about this kind of practice about emptiness and renunciation and bodhicitta and how the pathway would proceed. So now, without saying much more, so now we in this practice, I briefly mentioned the merit field in the space in front of you. Imagine the beautiful merit field in the space in front of you. Imagine that you have all of the beings. You have Kensar Geshe Wandak, who's inseparable from Aryatara, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Buddha Shakyamuni, imagining Demolochen Rinpoche, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Kensu Lobsan Jatsu, Geshe Doje Damdula, imagining Umzala Geshe Aga and Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin and Jeffrey Hopkins and Lama Alan Wallace and Chado Rinpoche, all these holy beings in the space in front of you. Again, right at the center, imagining Kensa Rinpoche inseparable from Arya Tara, white Tara specifically. Now imagine all of the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Asanga and Vasubandhu and Dignaga and Dharmakirti and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha and Lama Salimpa and Lord Atisha. Imagine the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita and Arya Deva and Chandrakirti and Shanti Deva and Chandrashita and Baba Vega and Kamala Shila and again Lama Salimpa and Lord Atisha. Imagining the beings of the profound view blessings lineage passed down from Vajradhara to Saraha and Matripa and Tilopa and Naropa and Lotsawa Marpa and Jetsu Milarepa and Gampopa. Imagining Lord Atisha is passing down the lineage of the Lamrim to Dron Tompa, and Dron Tompa is passing the Lamrim lineage down to so many holy beings. Imagining the three old Kadampa lineages, the lineage of the incredible masters from Tibet, the Nyingma lineage passed from Padmasambhava, and the Sakya lineage, Sakya Kanganimpo and Sakya Randawa and Sakya Pandita and the Kaju lineage, all of the Karmampas and Chuje, Lama Tsongkhapa's ordination master, imagining Lama Tsongkhapa, the head of the Galupa lineage, and Kirtub J and Joseph J, and Basuchuji Jetson and Penchen Sonandrapa and Jayan Sheba and Janjan Ropi Georgi and Gonju Jimmy Wampo, imagining the seventh Dalai Lama, Purbajo, Jetsumpa, all these holy beings are all on the space in front of you. Again, with Khensa Geshe Wanda Rinpoche, inseparable from Arya Tara, whoever your root Lama is, inseparable from Arya Tara, white Tara in the space in front of you, with seven eyes and the hand posture of generosity and the refuge mudra, holding upala flower with one blossoming, one closed, and one about to bloom. Imagining all of this in the space in front of you, all of the holy beings, highest yoga tantra, performance tantra, and action tantra, all the 35 Buddhas, all of the protector deities. Now, before we end class, I just want to do one round of Tara mantras. Something fell. One round of Tara mantras. And, okay. I don't know. One round of Tara mantras together. And so imagining the merit field, imagining you and all sentient beings. I'm not going to describe a practice per se. Everyone does their own individual practice. But what I will say, just imagining white Tara, beautiful and radiant, whether you're imagining the front generation, imagining on your crown, imagining self-generation and front generation, self-generation and front generation with Amitayas on your crown, Amitayas on both crowns, Amitabha on both crowns. There's many, many ways to do the practice of Tara. So I'm not going to give a specific prescription. Imagining, the Tara, wherever she is, has this beautiful wheel at her heart with a tom at the center that's circling around this tom. We have various different spokes and rims, and we have the Tara's mantra, Om Tare Tu Re. And then in the inner spoke, we have Mama Ayupuni Yana Pudding Guru Soha. We have Om Tare Tu Re, Mama Ayupuni Yana Pudding Guru Soha. Imagine these light rays are just coming off of this heart of Tara, wherever you're imagining her, or if you're imagining her as yourself. And imagining that around this kind of mantra garland, we have the Sanskrit alphabet going clockwise, and then one going counterclockwise, and then one going clockwise, and then imagining the essence of dependent origination mantra is circling around. Om, hey Dharma, hey tu Prabhava, hey tum te sham tatagato yavada te sham taru naroda ivam vadi mahashramana ye swaha. Om Tare Tu Re, Mama Ayupuni Yana Pudding Guru Soha. And then the Sanskrit alphabet. And then Om Hey Dharma, Hey Tu Prabhava, Hey Tu Teshan Tatagato Yavada, Teshan Chayon Naroda, Ivan Vadi Mahashramana Ye Soha. Om Hey Dharma, Hey Tu Prabhava, Hey Tu Teshan Tatagato Yavada, Teshan Chayon Naroda, Ivan Vadi Mahashramana Ye Soha. So imagining that these light rays and nectars are coming off of Tara and are purifying you and all sentient beings body, speech, and mind, imagining that all of your life force and all sentient beings' life force is being restored, imagining that all of your elements of your earth, water, wind, fire, and space are all being restored. All of your vows and pledges are being restored. All of your power is being restored. Imagining all of your vows, anything negative that you have within you is being restored. Imagine that these light rays and nectar, as you hear the recitation of this Tara mantra, are purifying all these negativities, any kind of obstacles that you have to long life. And specifically imagining that Tara is sending light rays and nectars to Laurie Rankin, imagining that white, yellow, red, blue, and green light rays and nectars are surrounding and going to Laurie Rankin. And imagine that she's being surrounded by tents of light with white light rays, yellow light rays, red light rays, blue light rays, green light rays, and purple light rays. So imagine this in any way that you need to imagine this, whether it's you in this tent with Laurie Rankin at your heart, or Tara, however you need to imagine this. Just imagine that as we're doing these mantras, I'm giving you some suggestions. If you know the Tara practice, you'll understand what these cues are. And please just imagine that Tara is healing and giving swift realizations and swift purifications to those all sentient beings who are plagued with the suffering of the afflictive obstructions and are plagued with a lack of happiness, a lack of perfect of happiness because of the obstructions to omniscience. And imagine that not only are sentient beings through these kind of light rays and nectars being purified of these kind of negativities and so forth. Imagine that they're having all the material goods needed, all the love. They feel so loved by these healing nectars of mantras and so forth that are coming. They feel so protected. Imagine that the Dharma is being given to them in so many different various ways. So just imagine as you're doing this practice, if you're doing it just for yourself, for others, because this is a Mahayana practice, in order to fulfill all of your own needs, you have to do it for everyone. Okay, so we'll recite one round of Tara mantras, and this is Khenser Geshe Wandak's mala. And however you would normally generate Tara, whether it's through the 6 deities and so forth, however you would normally do front self-generation. Again, this is on however you would normally do it. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Zoa, 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 Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Zoa, Om 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 Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Zoa, Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Zoa, Om 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 Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Zoa, Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Zoa, Om 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 Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Zoa, Dare do dare do re zo om, 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 dare do dare do re zo om. Dare do dare do re zo om, 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 dare do dare do re zo om. Dare do re so om, 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 dare do re so om. Dare do re so om, 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 dare do re so om. Dare do re so, dare do re so, on 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 dare do re so. Dare do re so on, 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 dare do re so on. Dare do re so on, 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 dare do re so on. Dare do re so on, 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 dare do re so on. Dare do re so on, 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 dare do re so on. Dare do re so om, 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 dare do re so. Prayer for the flourishing of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's Dharma in infinite worlds. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha Indraketa, he made his vow. The conqueror and his offspring praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish, that the lineage of pure view and conduct might spread. He offered a white crystal rosary to the sage who gave him a conch and prophesied. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish, his pure view free of eternity or destruction, his pure meditation cleansed of dark fading and fog, his pure conduct practiced according to the conqueror's orders. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Learned, since he extensively sought out learning, reverently, rightly applying it to himself, good, dedicating all for the beings in that doctrine. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Through being sure that all scriptures, definitive and interpretive, were without contradiction, advice for one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Listening to explanations of the three Pitakas, realized teachings, practice of the three highest higher trainings, his skilled and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting the two stages practice, he allied without clash the good truth paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Combining voidness explained as the causal vehicle with great bliss achieved by method, the effect vehicle, hard essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles. May the conqueror Lozong teachings flourish. By the power of the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors, like the main guardians of the three beings path, the quick-acting Lord, Vaishravana, Karmayana, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. In short, may by the lasting of glorious gurus' lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverend holders of the teaching, and by the increase of the power of its patrons, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. And then we'll do a concluding mandala offering dedication. And I just hope everybody has a safe New Year's Eve and remembers how precious this human life is. Really, I know I'm talking to a lot of variety of different people on a lot of applications. And I know many of you will be at big parties this evening, and just please be careful. This human basis we have is so easily lost. It's so precious. We can engage in this practice. We can engage in something that'll make our minds so much happier than anything we've ever known. And if you tonight go out and get drunk and smash up a car or do some drugs and overdose, you're not going to have the opportunity to experience the bliss that you were seeking tonight that wasn't going to work anyway. So please take care of this human basis, because it's so precious, so difficult to achieve, so easily lost. And please keep this in mind tonight, which is a night when so many people lose their lives needlessly, looking for happiness in something that can't provide happiness. So you will go out tonight and possibly die looking to get something that doesn't exist in samsara. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Lozandrapa, to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. And prayer to the protector, Paul Dalai Lama, Rinpoche said, is our protector. She's the wrathful emanation of Tara. You see her behind me. She looks scary, side saddle on a horse with an arrow in its butt, but there's a story behind it. And, beings emanate wrathfully in order to help sentient beings. It's not an angry situation. It's an expression of that in order to help. So our protector, the beings, Dharma protectors, protect the Dharma and protect the practitioners of the Dharma. So we pray to Paul Dalai Lama and Tara, who's Paul Dalai Lama is inseparable from Khyentse Geshe Wandak. Jorama 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 Jinjagala Raja Morama Jada Junjara Long Yong. Jorama 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 Jinjagala Rama Jada Junjara Long Yong. Jorama 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 Jinjagala Rama Jada Junjara Long Yong. Jorama 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 Jinjagala Rama Jada Junjara Long Yong. Jorama 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 Jinjagala Rama Jada Junjara Long Yong. Jorama 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 Jinjagala Rama Jada Junjara Long Yong. Jorama 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 Jinjagala Rama Jada Junjara Long Yong. Jorama 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 Dunjo Galaraja. Ramo Ajadaja Dunjo, Rulu Honjo. May any obstacles that are lingering be immediately removed through the power of this Drapo Sundri mantra, through the power of this teaching that I give, through the power of the 2 teachings a week that I give, through the power of the translations that I did for 25 years. May all obstacles from Laurie Rankin's longevity be removed. Om Vajrapani Hayagriva Garuda Hom Be. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise to Mantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. And this is the problem with samsara. This is all we can do. We can do all of the conventional things that we know we need to do, go to the right doctors, make the right prayers, but then understand that this is the problem with samsara. We're forced into this by our karma and afflictions. And I'm forced into this state of having to worry about a loved one because both of us seemingly are in samsara. And beings like His Holiness the Dalai Lama give us the medicine to get rid of this illness that we have, this sleep of ignorance, this medicine that allows us to wake up and never have to feel this pain again. And we can love everyone in the universe, and we can see the sadness of samsara and the dependent origination of samsara without feeling pain ourselves, because we know we're equipped to help in the best way possible, and we're not winging it. In the land, in that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. And a prayer of supplication to Namgyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak, who I feel is always right there and has always been right there And I just haven't been paying attention until now or something like this. Because this bond that I feel like, so, I've known so many people in my life, but this bond that I feel with Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche and Geshe Lobsang Gompo, and beginning now with other teachers, but really these two lamas and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But I spent so much personal time with these two lamas. There's just such a personal connection there that I feel is just embedded in my heart. But it's not embedded like, oh, I miss them. It's embedded like, man, they gave me the real gift, and I need to hold on to this precious gift as strong as I can. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend, who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like a teacher who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood that sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries, or she remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. So this is the Buddha talking. So he's saying he, because Buddha was he in this case, Shakyamuni Buddha. So we're just making it clear. Buddha nature doesn't have gender. Everyone has the same potential to remove the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. And the main, deity around here is Tara. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. And so they know that appearances aren't always reality, and how Aryatara could emanate as a 275-pound man. Okay, that's it. That's what I got for you. Thank you, everybody. See you in a couple weeks. See you when we see you. Keep us in your prayers. We need them. We're doing extremely hidden phenomena these days, because prayers we don't know. That's extremely hidden phenomena. Only the Buddhas knows, but we should do it. Thank you.